Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and we're almost at 8,000 subscribers. Maybe it's actually 8,000 when I post this video. But anyway, Honkai Star Rail as a live service game lives in the moment with constant updates. By nature of the character collector gacha, HSR releases new characters periodically, and you as a player must decide if you want to spend your limited resources to make an investment on these characters. But as expected, it is in the best interest profit-wise to create more FOMO and minimize skipping as much as possible. One of the ways to do this is to punish skipping by increasing demand of numbers to the point of roster obsolescence. This is what we know as power creep. While power creep is not necessary for any game genre, it is by far one of the most effective tools to get people to spend on gachas, and why it's still used today despite its negative connotation. Not saying it is a correct method, but it's simply the truth of tactics like these. Naturally, units that can resist power creep are more valuable. The underlying designs that allows longer viability is called future-proofing, and while no unit is immune against the sands of time in Star Rail as completely future-proof characters, there are those characters that have more resilience than others. Many people naturally assume that higher damage characters will age better later on, and thus is future-proof and will pull on it. The truth is that there is a more common factor that can dictate whether or not a unit can catch up in the future: their design space. A unit that has already reached their potential best team has less room to grow than a unit that doesn't have their best potential team yet. We've seen this throughout the history of the game. Things like a unit having a flawed mechanic, a unit lacking the push for a unique trait with few competitors, or even strong units that operate at a handicap through their teams. These characters are oftentimes characters that are likely to have some weird resurgence later on than those that have smaller design spaces to move forward. I thought about this more and more, and there's a lot more examples of this common quote-unquote future-proofing, and I thought the best examples are the 3 lightning crit damage dealers who are all limited. All 3 of these can exhibit the most common types of future-proofing used in Star Rail. Without further ado, let's see how future-proofing is done in Star Rail in this mini theorem of a video. Do mechanical flaws actually allow units to stay viable? While it seems odd to put Jingyuan in a future-proofing discussion in any form, Jingyuan has remained one of the most steadily balanced units in the game. One part of this is how easy he is to buff. No oversaturation of stats with high multipliers means he can practically take most crit-based buffs and get boosted by them more as buffers get stronger. But truthfully, Jingyuan is not unique on that front, so what about the other part? Jingyuan ironically has survived the 3.0 due to one thing: his Lightning Lord's clunkiness. From the start, Jingyuan was balanced around his Lightning Lord being particularly uninteractive and oftentimes a shackle due to its mechanical flaws. The existence of this shackle gives Jingyuan an upper edge that will allow him to break his ceiling over time. Throughout his meta journey, you can track his biggest updates and how each of them was tied to interacting with Lightning Lord. At first, he had Tingyun and Bronya. However, Bronya's short buffs did not allow Lightning Lord's multipliers to shine. He felt much worse to crowd control due to Lightning Lord's tuning. His first updates were Fushuan and Huohuo to remove Lightning Lord's CC issues. His second update was Sparkle, who had long enough buffs to finally buff Lightning Lord, and the Ash Blazing set was the most powerful on him specifically. His third and final update is Sunday, who could finally advance Lightning Lord and give Jingyuan a massive DPS increase to put him back to a good spot of viability. You can imagine that if Lightning Lord from the start was balanced around being interactive with Bronya, Jingyuan would have less room to grow from his base 1.0 kit and will eventually not receive many updates later on that would impact him specifically. Because of how unique his gimmick was, and how he in specific was held down, he received one of the biggest damage updates a DPS has ever received after their release, which was almost a total of 2 years. He was never broken, but also was never outright horrible due to how compatible he is with supports and how they kept indirectly upgrading his flawed mechanic. For that amount of longevity as a viable 1.0 character, honestly, that's not a bad deal, and he could have ended up much worse. You can check my acheron theorem for more information about acheron's viability and her greatest strength. If you've watched it already, let's move on. Does being restricted to use weaker teams make you more future-proof? Acheron is by far one of the strongest units in the game, with the strongest passive ever conceived. This, along with her multipliers, Omni Toughness Shred, and flexibility to AoE and single target, makes Acheron a meta character for any account. It's just a shame that she's stuck with the weaker Nihility path. Or is it? If you compare Acheron to many top damage dealers, healers, she falls behind due to one thing: her forced usage of the weaker nihility path. Take for example Jingyuan, who is a weaker character by many metrics, but his usage of stronger party members allows him to actually catch up with Acheron in his own unique way. Butil's versatility in team members can output higher numbers and deal with mechanics more than Acheron. There's no point then in adding this restriction to Acheron than for flavor purposes and is only a handicap, right? By objective standards, it is a handicap, but because she was released with this handicap in mind, it means Acheron still has more design spaces to fill out. Here's the deal: Acheron scales so well with her restrictions that even an unimpressive character for any other team is a huge upgrade for Acheron. Best example of this is Zhao Cho. By all metrics, he doesn't change the meta of any teams before him, but because he's relatively impressive compared to Acheron's weaker options, he becomes a significant upgrade to Acheron. You don't even have to take his ult charging into account for this. This means that Acheron has a lot of room to grow, as if her base power wasn't scary enough already. Right now, her best team includes Robin, and that's only because she's the best support in general. Replacing Robin's slot for Acheron teams wouldn't be hard to do, and this unit may not even be considered good. It will still be an insane Acheron upgrade due to fitting the restriction. Acheron's restrictions also applies to debuffs from sustains. There's more room to grow there too. If Acheron from the start did not have these restrictions, she will be much easier to replace. Just a plain lightning damage dealer that would get caught in a tighter numbers game. Ironically, being locked to using weaker units made her more viable for the future. Even with another lightning damage dealer releasing, Acheron still remains a looming threat because of how little it takes for her to get a huge meta update. And for Acheron to be released nearly a year ago and still tearing up the meta rankings, honestly, that's quite impressive. Okay Wave, you pretty much mentioned that starting at a handicap is the best way to be future-proof, but it doesn't have to be like that, right? Is there any other way than a straight-up handicap for a unit to be used later on? Do note that what I will say is based on my opinion of future TC and something they can easily not do, though it shouldn't take away that the design space of this unit has a lot of room to grow. Aglaea will be releasing soon, and from the look of things, she's quite exciting. She is a turbo speed DPS that can reach up to 8 or more attacks in 100 action value, all on her own in a single ultimate cycle with no need for SP. She has a lot of free stats and has a very high max energy. For now, she's considered a hyper carry due to how strong her damage is. But as illustrated earlier, this may not be true for very long. And if you're a leaks watcher, you'd probably know more about that. Aglaea being a plain lightning hyper carry leads to less design spaces. How can Aglaea find herself in the future if her hyper carry role is narrow from the start? Well, it's her frequency of attacks. Along with the fact that Aglaea has so many attacks on her own at a short period of time, she has a unique joint attack which can trigger additional damage twice. Assuming a turn advancer, that's 12 procs of additional damage in one cycle. Not even the Mosquito Bites team with Fei Xiao can compete with this much attacks in that short amount of action value. We already see that this can be something that works with the Mosquito Bites team, and Robin isn't exactly focused solely on additional damage. Imagine a unit that is actually tuned for additional damage setups. This means that once Aglaea's numbers start to fall as a hyper carry, an additional damage dealer who can do more damage than her will see her as a sub DPS and become an enabler, proccing additional damage an absurd amount of times that nobody else could. This design space of her as a support will, I can bet you, to be something that she will eventually be the best at and revive her viability. This is why even traits that seem okay just for now are good for future viability. Imagine if she didn't have this unique gimmick. You can look at other examples like Argenti and Serval for the Herta team. As a plain hyper carry, Argenti wasn't going to last very long, but the one unique thing he has is incredible ult spams, which leads to him rising from the grave and supporting the Herta. Much like Aglaea, a unique trait that may be useless for now can eventually bloom into their lifeline to become the meta once more. Again, it's hard to make guarantees on gacha in general, especially with future characters. A character like Blade, who actually does have a large design space, hasn't been dealt quite well with, which leads to his notoriety. And a character that can be as complete as Firefly can still be popular and meta due to other factors. Future-proofing is a deep subject, and these are only examples why it isn't strictly bigger numbers that make the difference of a unit's shelf life. Even their weaknesses becoming strengths are a huge part of it, and things that you may never see becoming viable end up being their lifeline for the future. Anyway, I hope you guys liked this video. I actually was thinking halfway through writing this to make it on Argenti theorem, I guess. That actually sounds That actually has a nice ring to it. I should have probably done that. Maybe I'll remake this video to be the Argenti theorem, but that will wait for another day. I hope you guys didn't mind the length of this video that it took to release. I really was lacking creative flow, so I have no excuses. My brain just farted. Like, share, subscribe, do the algorithm stuff, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.